Good evening, good people. Thank you so much for joining us tonight for the first of a series of Spark Leadership conversations about supporting diversity in political leadership. I'm Tanya St. Julian, and I'm delighted to host this month's Spark Leadership conversation in honor of Black History Month. For those of you who are new to this community, SPARK is Leadership for Educational Equity's initiative that supports increasing diversity in political leadership. We help members from underrepresented groups run strong, winning campaigns by connecting them to a community of people who share their values, people like you. I'll talk more about this at the end of tonight's chat. Leadership for Educational Equity develops leaders to change laws. They change laws and policies that prevent all children and their families and their communities from living into their fullest, brightest potential. We are over 45,000 members strong, and we're growing. It's been 12 years since the Barack Obama became our first Black president, and it's been a little over a month since Madam Vice President Kamala Harris became the first Black American, first South Asian, and first woman to hold the second highest seat in the country. Their elections represent paradigm-shifting milestones for Black political representation. There are some who say that this reflects that we've reached the pinnacle of Black political leadership. At Lee, we say, give me more. You know what really blows my mind? The fact that there are 0 Black governors, 0. And only 3% of our Senate is Black, despite Black people being 13% of the population. What does this say about who's speaking up for justice? Research shows that people closest to inequity are the very ones that transform society, and we've seen that. And that's why we at Lee say, give me more. More Black leaders to lead with equity and values at the center of their work. At a time when many organizations are signaling their support for Black lives and justice for Black communities, I'm so proud to work in an organization where we've invested in so many Black members running for office. They run for office to make space for Black excellence in schools and communities. They run for office to share their Black joy and inspire it in their communities. They run for office to share their curiosity about solving problems that are unique to Black communities. And they run for office to represent their families and their communities at the places where the laws and policies that we all live by are made. To date, Lee has supported over 135 Black candidates with a win rate of 50%. For those of you who are a little politically savvy, that's unheard of. The American national win rate for average first-time candidates is around 2%, 22%. We're doing double that. And we're excited, and we're just getting started. Our SPARK initiative is an integral part of this, as it works to support underrepresented candidates specifically. Tonight, I'm humbled to be able to host this amazing conversation, and I'm hopeful about how it inspires all of you to engage in the process of electing leaders that reflect all of our needs in this American democratic experiment. Tonight's conversation will be moderated by a personal hero of mine, Secretary John King. Secretary King will engage 2 living legends currently serving in the highest political offices in our country, US Senator Cory Booker and my Congressman, Hakeem Jeffries from the most thorough borough of Brooklyn. Then Secretary King will lead us into the future with burgeoning leaders, Sharice Davis from Georgia Cobb County, and Reginald Boulding, Arizona State Representative and minority leader. Now a little bit about Secretary King. He served as US Secretary of Education in the Obama administration. And prior to that role, Secretary King carried out the duties of Deputy Secretary, overseeing policies and programs related to P-12 education, English learners, special ed, innovation, and agency operations. Dr. King joined the department following his post as New York State Education Commissioner. And currently, he's the president and CEO of the Education Trust, a national nonprofit organization that seeks to identify and close educational opportunity and achievement gaps. And he currently serves on our lead board of directors. And my personal favorite thing about Secretary King is that he began his career as a high school social studies teacher, me too, and middle school principal. Once a teacher, always a teacher. So I'm excited about the gems tonight that we're going to learn from these current political leaders and our burgeoning political leaders, and excited for a really hopeful conversation.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Tanya. Excited for tonight's conversation. I'm going to say a couple words of introduction of Senator Booker and Congressman Jeffries, but then just want to dive into the discussion. Senator Booker probably requires no introduction, but I will say he's long been a hero of mine. Started out running for the city council in Newark, ran for mayor of Newark. There's a fantastic documentary, if you haven't seen it, Street Fight, about his first run for mayor. And then he ran for mayor again, was elected mayor, served as mayor of Newark, helped really usher in a significant renaissance in Newark, including around schools. And then ran for the United States Senate, has served in the United States Senate from the state of New Jersey, and ran for president of the United States. So I'm excited to hear lessons on politics from Senator Booker. We also will be joined by Representative Hakeem Jeffries, another hero of mine, especially as a kid from Brooklyn. I've long admired Congressman Jeffries' career. He serves now as the House Democratic Caucus chair, in addition to representing Brooklyn in the House. And he has long been a champion of important issues of social justice, including issues like policing reform that are very much in today's conversation. He also served as an impeachment manager in the first impeachment of the former president, the former 45th president. So looking forward to hearing his insights and lessons for us on politics. So let me dive right into the conversation with you, Senator Booker. It's good to see you.
It's great to be seen. It's really you are really always been a joy to connect with. I'm just happy we're connecting in such a great forum.
Yes, well, thank you for making time for Lee and for all the folks who are joining us tonight. It'd be great to hear how you think about your role as an African-American senator. As one of the few African-Americans who's ever served in the Senate, how you think about what that means and how you think about what responsibility you have to try to bring voices into the room in the United States Senate that haven't always been heard.
Yeah, I ran knowing that I was driving to represent a lot of issues that just aren't brought up enough, I should probably say, because there's a lot of great champions of social justice, civil rights, criminal justice reform. But I got to the Senate and I was struck very immediately that it was the least diverse place I had ever worked. And I knew that if you did not have diverse voices in the room, I remember ducking my head into the Judiciary Committee and I didn't see one black or brown face serving as a staffer in the room. And I went to Chuck Schumer with a great Senator Brian Schatz and just said, this has got to change. And we talked about the value of diversity. And Senator Schumer, to his credit, was thrilled to work on it with us. And we just created systems of accountability. The first thing he did was have every senator Democratic senator, publish their diversity statistics. And he later told me he got a little pushback, but the reality is once the window was open and people could see, it caused a lot of movement. And every year that we've done it, we've seen the number of women and minorities being hired getting higher. So look, this has been the experience. One of the things that's marked my experience is just calling questions, challenging things. I remember when I got to the Senate, I looked at just pension funds, there, as you know, New York to New Jersey to Texas, red states even have diverse managers managing this fund that creates generational wealth. And when I got in the federal government, I asked just the question, are any of the hundreds of billions of dollars in the largest pension funds in the country, if not the world, being managed by anybody diverse? Answer was no. And so I've just found that as a sort of repeated part of my experience. And, I'm not absent the realization that I'm only the fourth Black person ever popularly elected to the United States Senate. There were some in Reconstruction, amazing heroes in the Reconstruction period, but it is still a very rare thing. And in addition to all of that, another thing I'm very much focused on is seeing more United States senators, African-American United States senators, be elected. And that means that we have to have candidate recruitment that really focuses on diversity ourselves at the what they call the DSCC, the Democratic Senate Coordinating Committee.
Last year we had a lot of conversation as a country about issues of racial justice. You were a leading voice in many of those conversations. But I worry that there was more maybe rhetoric than reality to some of that conversation around the country. Lots of schools, corporations, foundations put out statements of solidarity with Black Lives Matter, but then they haven't always changed their policies, kind of delivered on that rhetoric. Where do you think we are in terms of that national conversation about racial justice? How optimistic are you that we will see meaningful progress going forward?
Look, it's been a long and painful road. I was really broken up after the deaths of Ahmaud Arbery and Breonna Taylor and George Floyd, because it just jolted me. In fact, I wrote an essay when I was at Stanford and young, early 20s, and it was after the killing of or the beating of Rodney King, and when the verdict came out that they were not going to be held accountable. I remember being in the streets marching, but I remember writing this essay for the Stanford newspaper called "Why I've Lost Control," and it was this 22 years of frustration. As I was 6'3", I think, in 8th grade, and just seeing how the world treated me, the fear of my Black elders, and I just remember this defiant feeling during those protests that we were going to end this, that no generation of Blacks would ever have to teach their children anymore these lessons of survival about how your body will be focused on, attacked, injured, killed because of who you are. And I think the difficult part for me was this last year was just this painful reality that I am teaching the next generation that we have not stopped that horrible tradition that goes back centuries in the United States. And so you asked me that question, and I have to tell you, I'm the only senator, I believe, that lives in a low-income, majority Black and brown neighborhood. And I always say I got my BA from Stanford, but my PhD on the streets of Newark for people who taught me some of those profound spiritual lessons. And I'll never forget Miss Virginia Jones. I moved into these high-rise projects for 8 years, and Miss Virginia Jones was our tenant president, whose son was murdered in the buildings in which I lived in the 80s, and I moved in the 90s. And I remember just sort of asking her, sort of surprised, like, how do you stay in these buildings? I know where she worked. I know she could have lived other places, and these were really, in the 90s, they were tough places to live. And she looked at me almost like she was kind of annoyed and amused by the question. And she's like, "Why am I still here?" And I go, "Yes, Miss Jones." "Why am I still in apartment 5? "Yes, Miss Jones." "Why am I still the tenant president since the buildings were built in '69? And I said, "Yes, Miss Jones, why?" And she goes, "Because I'm in charge of Homeland Security." And there's this defiance in her spirit that taught me, instructed me, healed me from some of my more painful experiences, that she taught me really that hope is the active conviction that despair will never have the last word. And so I don't think we have any choice but to choose hope and be agents of hope. And you're right, the last year was, I call it the tilling of the soil of our souls. I think more Americans than ever before have had this sort of just brokenness. And I'm a big believer, if America hasn't broken your heart, you don't love her enough. You're not paying attention with that love. The question is now is, will seeds be planted that will grow a harvest? Because I have seen a lot of activity, but I look around and wonder right now at this moment where policy-wise we have an alignment between a Democratic president, Democratic House, Democratic Senate. Will we be able to actually get real work done? $20 billion. We're about to do a $1.9 trillion bill, God willing. $20 billion could remove every lead service line from America, which most people don't know that there are 3,000 jurisdictions where children have more than twice the blood lead levels of Flint, Michigan. This disproportionately, environmental injustices like this affect Black children. Do we have the will to spend the finite amount of resources to stop that violence on the developing brains of our children? I'll give you another example. I just introduced a bill with some amazing congresswomen in the House called the Momnibus, which is all about healing the atrocious, tragic, wretched levels of maternal mortality in our country, which is the worst of most developed nations. But for Black women, it's even worse than for white women. And there are common sense things we can do. Most of the realities we experience right now are a result of policy choices or lack thereof. They're not some kind of destiny. And so I feel very impatient. I feel this sense of urgency. I don't know the answer to your question of whether we will go the right path, but I know that I am hopeful. I am a prisoner of hope, and I am determined to choose hope every day, and that keeps me going and energized and hopeful and loving in this fight.
I'm deeply grateful to you, and I know everyone on this call is ready to stand with you in that fight. I want to maybe take us back. So many of the Lee members are either thinking about running for office or newly elected to office. I want to take us back to when you were first making the decision to run for city council and then first making the decision to run for mayor. Tell us about those moments in your career path and what insights you might have for young people who are trying to decide, is that the right path for them?
Yeah, so I'm not native to Newark, and I'm a guy who grew up in very, relatively affluent suburbs where my parents had to get a white couple that poses them to break real estate steering. Violence broke out. I mean, my family moved in, and I was a baby and grew up in northern New Jersey, northeast corner of the state. And I was raised by parents who were civil rights activists who just said, my dad would be like, "Boy, don't walk around this house like you hit a triple. You were born on third base, and you can't ever pay back the sacrifices that were to take to get you here, but you've got to pay it forward." And so when I, got 2 degrees out at Stanford, Oxford, Yale, my dad was just not impressed. He's like, "Boy, you got more degrees in the month of July, but you ain't hot. Life ain't about the degrees you get; it's about the service you give." And my mom challenged me coming out of law school to say, "What would you do if you knew you couldn't fail? Go do that." And so I was inspired by a guy named Jeffrey Canada, who was my hero. And I went to Newark to start a nonprofit based in the law. I was a lawyer, but I really was into community organizing. And, we started with a lot of momentum to take on those slumlords at these multi-family buildings. And I thought I had my life. I had a prestigious, public interest fellowship, pay me $30,000 a year and helping me meet loan payments. And I was set. I knew what I was going to do. My dream was to start something like the Harlem Children's Zone. But I then did something that terrified me. The tenant leaders said that the biggest thing you could do for this community is help to take on City Hall. City Hall's corrupt. They were upset about a lot of those landlords who were big contributors to city council people or the particular council person they wanted me to run against. And I refused, and I argued, and I had to come back to what my mom said, and what Miss Jones said to me at the time. She just said, "Boy, why are you here? Are you here to be a lawyer? Are you here to do what the people need you to do?" And so I did something that was, in hindsight, just stupid. I gave up a job, lived off my credit card and my parents' grace to take on a machine that the joke was back then people used to joke with me that city council people never lose in Newark, New Jersey. The only way they leave office is death or conviction, and not conviction of your principles. The person I was running against was 40 years my senior, had been in office for a very long time, and I was running against a machine. It was considered impossible to do, and it was just one of the scariest things that I ever did. I still remember making that decision. I've never broken out in hives in my life. I broke out in hives and had back spasms. I was just like eating myself up, but I did it. I jumped, and again, there's an old definition of faith that when you come to the end of all the light you know, and you're about to step into the darkness, faith is knowing one of two things will happen. Either you'll find solid ground underneath you, or the universe will send you people who teach you how to fly. And the community leaders, you know, I can name so many of these elders, walked me through buildings, knocked on doors. They wouldn't open the door for me, but folks would open the door when they saw, you know, Miss Elaine Sewell, Miss Yancey. I mean, and they would just say, this boy is going to take care of us. You can trust him. And we didn't win the first round, but we pushed the incumbent into a runoff, and then we won what I remember some New Jersey paper saying was the biggest unexpected political upset. And so for me, I've stayed in that community. I still live right down the street from where I used to live, in the high-rise projects are no longer there. In my Senate office is this big map of that we used in that election with all the districts on it. And I keep that there every single day, so I never forget why I ran for office, because life is about purpose. It's not about position. And I want to stay loyal to the people who took a risk on me. I just lived in the city for a year, took a risk on me, believed in me enough, and then elected me. And I still think it was almost improbable victory. I mean, had every disadvantage, but we knocked on thousands and thousands of doors, giving out my personal phone number to everyone I met. When we realized there were communities of great need, we just decided to start bringing help even before we were elected. Expungement clinics, and just tried to be for many, many months, just became part of the communities with community leaders. This was a really grassroots effort. And just to give you an example, my opponent got the same amount of votes he had gotten in all of his previous elections, but we ended up bringing out an entirely new electorate that was willing to take a risk on me and give me a chance. And that election, it is still so much a part of me. I feel this deep sense of obligation and gratitude to those communities, and it informs my work, because when Hakeem Jeffries, whose face I see right now, he was one of the leaders, incredible leaders on the House side that helped us get the First Step Act done. I always joke that when I can go back to my neighborhood and walk my streets, see people in the community, and they can come up to me and say, what you did helped my family, or what you did got my folk justice. I mean, that's a great measure for me of, am I staying true to the people who took me up and down high-rise buildings, through projects, to give a shot to me to be in public office.
Thank you for sharing that, Senator. Welcome, Congressman. Good to see you.
Good evening. Great to see you, Secretary King. Great to see you, Senator Booker.
So I'm going to ask you to answer two of the things that I asked Senator Booker. One is tell us about your first decision to run. What made you run for office? How did you weigh the choices there? What can we learn from your decision to go into public life in that way?
Well, I'd gone to law school with the intention of trying to use my law degree in a manner that would somehow advance the cause of social, racial, and economic justice for the communities in Central Brooklyn and those like them across the city of New York and possibly the nation, but without being certain as to what exactly I wanted to do, whether that was individual representation, impact, litigation, some combination thereof, advocacy work. And so, I started off my career, clerked for a judge, spent a few years in the litigation department at Paul Weiss, Rifkin, Wharton, and Garrison, thinking about what I wanted to do next. And after a few years of practicing law there, decided that I would run for office, a seat in the New York State Assembly, hoping to use the skills and the training and the education that I had acquired to advocate on behalf of those communities in Central Brooklyn where I had grown up. And so I make this decision as a young lawyer to run against a 20-year incumbent, not unlike Corey's situation, who was backed by the Albany political establishment, the Brooklyn Democratic machine. And I'm just this young lawyer, have no name recognition, no money in the bank, no prior political involvement, but I make the decision that I'm going to run to try to make things better in my little corner of the world. And so I go to visit a longtime community leader to ask for his advice on this possible run, and hopefully earn his support. And so at the end of the conversation, I'll never forget it. He says, well, you seem like you've got some ability, young man, but let me ask you a question. What exactly is your electoral base? How many people can you count on to vote for you on election day? And Corey, I hadn't really thought about that question. So trying to think quickly on my feet, like I was being back in the law school classroom with the Socratic method, with all of the confidence that I could muster, I said, I can count on 2 people, myself and my wife. And then, John, I thought about that answer for a moment, and I realized that even that calculation might be a little bit shaky. Because on any given night, if a brother wasn't doing the right thing at home, I could suffer a 50% erosion of my electoral base. But somehow, Corey, I held the coalition together. And that first race, I got more than 4,000 additional people to vote for us. In an assembly race, we didn't win, unlike Corey, but we did shock the establishment, got over 40% of the vote, and it laid the foundation, for me to ultimately be successful a few years later when the seat became vacant. And I decided to dive back in because there were people who took a risk on me. And I felt like I owed them the obligation to finish the job and then to go out and try to make things better. And to show that, I guess our generation could be the type that made promises and then really sought to keep them, to be visible, to be active, to be engaged, and to drive legislation solely in the best interest of the people that we represent. So it was a great honor.
Hey, Congressman, let me interrupt you because I want to get my question in before John does, because I think there are a lot of people listening to this. You and I both faced like really tough losses. You just admitted you ran and lost. And I think some people get discouraged and they're just done. But you said you picked yourself up because of and it spoke to me because I could have gotten a job after my election from Newark to Norway, but a lot of people put their necks out for me, lost jobs over our race and stuff like that. But there's got to be another part of it for you, man. You had to have faced discouragement, and yet there you had to find something inside yourself that made you pick up from that loss and try again.
Yeah, no, it's an interesting point, Corey. And not only did I lose once, I lost twice, right? So I came back the second time 2 years later, but that was a redistricting year. And me being naive, didn't really know what I was getting myself into. And then I remember getting a call on Valentine's Day that said, Hakeem, the new lines have just come out and your house has been cut out of the district by a block. And I remember thinking to myself, now I knew Brooklyn politics could be rough, but cutting my house out of the district by a block, that move is gangster.
Yes.
And that's what we were up against in Brooklyn. And you were up against that in the extremes in Newark with the Sharp James machine. I ran anyway because I was determined not to allow that effort to gerrymander me out, to stop me, but realized subsequently that in cutting out my house, they also cut out many of the election districts where I performed the best in the previous race. And so I did reasonably well again, but lost. Now I'm knocked down on the ground twice, but a knockdown is different than a knockout, right? And that's the point. And I even drew a lot of inspiration, from Corey and Corey's races, right? Because I remember watching that 2002 race, and many of my friends, Rich Bury, others were involved. I contributed what I could from Brooklyn, but it was an inspirational race when Corey ran in 2002, same year I lost the second time. And I remember saying, at the end of the day, Corey losing, though we were all in for him, is not the worst thing in the world. People said, why? I said, because we all believe that Corey will be a great leader, but he's had nothing but success, enviable success, his entire professional journey. New Jersey football star, Stanford academic All-American for all intents and purposes, Rhodes Scholar, Yale, runs his first race, wins, right? But this is a tough business that we're in now, in the House, the Senate, dealing with all of these issues. We thought Corey would be a great leader, but he needed to test his mettle and face adversity. And sometimes the losses show more about a person than the wins.
I mean, you and I both know this. You find, first of all, I advise everybody who's thinking about running for office or is, if you're going to have a spectacular failure, have a documentary team there to capture it, because it makes for your most humiliating moments captured on a documentary team. But I think you're so wise in what you just said, man, because I think I've learned more from that loss, that 2002 loss, than I have from any other election. It really was, in terms of just rote politics. And I learned more about myself in the darkness, facing defeat, facing everything when it sort of all falls down all around you. So I appreciate that. If I can ask one other question though, it's a different challenge. I imagine, maybe I'm wrong, running for office, for a state level office, than running for a federal level to be a member of the House. And then I was wondering, you did something that is pretty impressive, should be pretty impressive to everybody. You then ran a race in the House to be in House leadership. And I'm wondering, could you just maybe talk about some of those differences in that journey?
Yeah, there's no race that's more intense than a race with your colleagues.
Yeah.
And, because you're often in a race with one or more people who are not just colleagues, but people you respect, look up to, are friends with. And so that's a tough situation. I ran 2 House leadership races. My first race was for the position as one of the co-chairs of the Communications Committee. That was a 6-person race. The top 3 people prevailed. So that race, doesn't have the same degree of pressure on your colleagues because there are at least 3 people that they can choose. 6 of us ran, and you've got to, pick up the phone and your colleagues are voters. You have to call everybody and make your case and ask for support. And, and so it can be intense. And the race for caucus chair was even more intense because there were 2 Congressional Black Caucus members in the race, myself and Barbara Lee, who's a progressive icon. We both ran a race that was super competitive. It was close at the end of the day. But she articulated the vision, I articulated the vision, and we always express respect for each other. But it's not an easy decision to make the choice to step into a leadership race because, unlike that context of challenging an incumbent, and the generational dynamics or different politics that are at play, the need for change in a leadership race. You know, it's a family affair, and I often say that leadership races are like a knife fight in the phone booth. It can get rough, but thankfully, in the one that I ran, we resolved that no matter what was going to happen, we were going to come together that evening. We all had dinner that evening, and we've continued to work closely together. She's been gracious. I'd like to believe that I would have been just as gracious had the outcome not have been the same.
I want to make sure we get at some of our earlier in their career elected officials into the conversation. So we have a question for you both from Representative Reginald Boulding out of Arizona. Representative Boulding.
First, I want to say thank you both for this conversation. I'm really loving it and enjoying it, and it's bringing back memories for myself personally. As was mentioned, my name is Reginald Boulding. I serve as our House Minority Leader in the Arizona State Legislature. I do have a question for you both. What advice would you give us Black candidates as we continue to grow in our own leadership?
I yield to the.
Corey,
I yield to the man in leadership.
I yield to the man in the House of Lords.
Look, I think the one piece of advice I would give you is Hakeem's already articulated it. You stand on a foundation, on a base that got you to where you are, and never forsake that, never neglect it, and so the more you honor that and serve it and stay close to those folks and show them that show them your character, that's always been important to me. And just having a strong foundation to serve on. And then the second thing I would say for me, it's that same lesson I learned in 1998. I never want to become comfortable. I always want to continue to take risks and push myself. And if I ever become tired and just going through the motions, I want to get the hell out and let somebody else come in who's hungry every day. And so I love this job that I have because it gives me a chance to, number one, respect the foundation I stand on, but to try new things, to reach for new things, to stretch myself as well. But what about you, Hakeem?
Yeah, no, I think building upon exactly what Corey said, we stand on the shoulders of giants wherever we are, right? Certainly here in Washington, the founders of the Congressional Black Caucus 50 years ago, 13 strong, now we're over 50, approaching 60. But, in Arizona and in all of the states, there were pioneers who paved the way for us. And I think always having respect and reverence for the trailblazers, genuine, authentic respect and reverence is important because they opened the door for us, and we stand on their shoulders and have a lot to learn from them, and hopefully carrying the legacy forward. And then the other thing I'd just say from a leadership perspective, I found is that respect all of your colleagues. And, the House is a different institution than the Senate. Corey and I joke about that a lot. Some of us believe that, the House is like public school and the Senate's like private school. And, it's a big, diverse public school, right? It's a magnet school in the House, but it's big, it's rowdy, there's a lot going on. And, if you serve in the House or in the legislative body, I embrace that. Embrace the personalities, embrace the enthusiasm, learn something from everyone. I'm sure in the same way that Corey navigates, the dynamics of the Senate, and someone on both sides of the aisle, everyone has something that they can teach you, that you can learn from, observations, strengths, sometimes challenges and mistakes, but embrace that and lean into it. And I think that certainly makes you within the legislative body the most effective member that you can be.
Yes, a follow-up question to Representative Boulding's question. One of the things we hear a lot from Lee members is the the daunting nature of fundraising, particularly if you don't have personal wealth and you aren't necessarily spending a lot of time with wealthy people. What advice would you give as new candidates think about the challenge of fundraising?
Yeah, fundraising is one of the tough aspects of this business. And Corey, is one of the best fundraisers, Black, white, Latino, Asian, Native American, or otherwise. And so, I'll defer to Corey and his success. But the one thing that I'd say is when you're starting out, just think about your family, your friends, your classmates, your coworkers, and then build out those concentric circles. And you as the candidate or you as the elected official, you're going to be the person who can sell your story the best and why investing in you, makes sense. But, look for those who can buy into that and are willing to help out. And the most logical place to start is in those groups of people who know you the best. The one thing I will say about campaigning and fundraising is that, it's like a tale of two cities. There are going to be people who you thought would be there for you who are going to disappoint you. And so just recognize that, and that's just the reality of the situation. But there will be so many others who you never thought would step up in the way that they do, whether that's handing out literature on the street corner, making phone calls for you, or contributing. And that is one of the more gratifying aspects of campaigning and fundraising. And that's just much like human nature.
Hakimi, I know you've got some stories. Like I was out in California visiting a guy I'd known for years. And so I knew him. It wasn't a political relationship or somebody I met through my job. And he and I were just talking about Nancy Pelosi. He goes, Corey, Nancy came over to my house. She had gifts from my kids. She remembered their names. And he just started breaking all the things he goes, Corey, before she could even ask, I had my checkbook open because she's just so good and making, and so what I'm just saying is like, you and I both know that first of all, that everything you said is right. I did that. Start in 1998. I sat down. Who's my family? Who's my circle of friends? Who did I go to college with? All of that. But when you and I both look at the elites in this business, it's not because they started with a better hand of cards. They just created deeper, more substantive relationships. Now, I don't know if Nancy has that kind of genius mind, or she has a great staff that says to her before she goes in, or when she comes out, she goes, okay, this is the kids' names, this is their birthday, whatever. And she just keeps a great system. But I've learned that, and for me, you're more successful when you make people feel an authentic connection to you. The work, the mission is very important. And when you remember people, you and I both sat there on weekends and made calls to people for their birthdays, to give them updates, to find creative Zoom calls I've done during this with my team, to find out, these are my team that's part of my fundraising team that's interested in criminal justice reform. Here are some people that are interested in animal issues. It's something that's really important to me as a vegan. Those are the best kind of relationships I have for fundraising, because they're people they're invested in me because of the mission that I'm on, and we've created a real substantive connection, and we put in the hours and hours of work to cultivate those relationships so that we can be successful. It's not fun in terms of just like the work and the hours you have to put in. It takes sacrifice. But look, you're right. Yeah, thank you for talking about my athletic career. The older I get, better I was. There were parts of it I hated, man. I didn't enjoy wind sprints. I didn't enjoy every hour I spent in the weight room. But if I wanted to be elite, and if I wanted to be excellent, I had to put in the time, put in the effort. So that's the first thing I want to say, which is you and I both know the best of the best in this. And they had this special way of making people feel special, making people feel connected, having this real connection. The second thing I want to say is the other thing that you and I have learned, I think, which has changed during the period from us starting the early aughts till now, which is the power of online fundraising, and just the fact that I was blown away in my presidential run that the amount of money we were raising organically from hundreds and hundreds of thousands, over 1 million people in America, the small dollar contributions they were giving me were better than any of the big dollar donors that we had. It drove down the average contribution. And I still remember the conversation. I'm the fourth senator to do this, but I sat with my team just looking at the understandable skepticism of a lot of senators. And I just said, look, we're going to stop taking any kind of corporate money, any kind of C-suite money from pharma people, oil companies and the like. And even though we knew other competitors, especially Republican Party, which you and I both know is so driven by some of these industries. And so what the blessing has been for me is we wiped our hands of that kind of resources, but we have just found small dollar contributions being a whole new open opportunity for us. And I know you have a very strong base. You've built a very strong email list. So that's the second part of it is I've got a base of people that when I jump, there's hundreds of good friends that will write a check and start. But the other thing is that I've started making a name for myself using digital platforms and others that I really encourage people to do, to lean into social media, to celebrate how they're different, to show that you're independent from the money resources that often control politics. That's going to make people want to support you with $5, $10 and the like. So I would just give those two things. Have a core of people around you that aren't interested in you because they can get the sanitation contract, but interested in you because they believe what you believe in criminal justice. They believe what you believe in education. They believe what you believe in healthcare. That base I will always love, but also start leaning into this idea that we can democratize campaigns and find ways to creatively using these platforms to begin to elevate your mission, which is to change politics as we know it, which I listen, Hakeem and I have a lot of personal conversations that I know is the two of our mission.
Thank you. I want to make sure we get Sharice Davis in, who's a member of the Cobb County School Board, who has a question for you both.
Yes, hello, thank you. I'm Sharice Davis on the Cobb County School Board. I've had this role for 2 years now, and I just wanted to tell you, thank you all for being here. You're inspiring me, but also making me laugh a lot. So thank you for that, I appreciate it. So my question is about really representation and what you think it means for our nation if we do have more Black leaders elected. And I would also add, just not at the federal level, but of course, all the way down to county and city races as well.
Can I go first, Hakeem?
Yeah, Corey.
Because I want to talk smack about you. So Hakeem and I had a late night conversation the other night, and my girlfriend, who just moved into Newark, but she's from Brooklyn, is like, I told her, I go, honey, I'm not gonna be free tonight until whatever time. And she's like, what are you doing? I said, I'm on with it. I need to talk to him. She got on. This is why I was laughing when he was saying about like him losing 50% of his support. Because my girlfriend, when she voted for me, became a New Jersey resident, she voted for marijuana first. She's like, let me vote for what's most important. and then she voted for me. Look, I say this because I said to Hakeem the other day, and he and I were talking about, when you talk about representation, I'm so happy to see you because there have been a lot of Black, not a lot, there's been 2 elected Black male governors. There's been a whole lot of Black male senators. Of the 11, 9 of them have been, since Reconstruction, have been men. But I have a real concern that we aren't making enough pathways to Black women in politics. And that's why I'm grateful for you to ask this question about what representation means. I remember sending a picture to Kamala when she gave her acceptance speech. And it was of a friend of mine's daughter watching the TV as if she was just wrapped with like awe of what she was seeing. And I don't think that it's one of those pictures that's you can't put it into words what that representation means. And then when I begged Kamala to run for Senate, because I'm going to do everything I can to get as many Black women into the Senate as I can. And she and I had a funny conversation because she came to Washington. We knew we were going to connect to deliver an imperative message to me, and I wanted to give an imperative message to her. My imperative message was run for the Senate, don't run for governor. her imperative message was, dude, you need to get married. And I just remember telling, I know that's how great of a sister she's been to me, but I just remember telling her what it meant, as the only Black person in the Democratic caucus, and telling her more than me that her stepping onto the Senate floor would change the very spirit of the place, because the place just hasn't seen people like her before. And so representation matters. It's why I want more Black staffers, staffers of color. This is why I want, I work very hard on diversity in a lot of different fronts. In the Senate, we have a lot of not appointment power, but influence. We have to advise and consent the president on a lot of positions. So it is a very powerful thing. And what I appreciate about what you've heard, Hakeem, and this is, I'll pass it over to him, you heard him bragging about the Congressional Black Caucus and how the size of the Congressional Black Caucus. And for me, by the way, being one of the few senators who had this privilege to cross the Capitol and sit down at that table. And by the way, it rotates who brings the food. And the only time I almost got, only time I've ever been threatened by a congressperson ever in my life was when I brought vegan food as my meal. Don't roll up into a Black gathering of people who are of a generation above you with vegan meals. I'm so happy Marcia Fudge is now in the cabinet, so she can't still threaten me. But there's something powerful about when I sit around that table. For me, it's like food to my soul. Forget me not eating the chicken, but it is food to my soul. I know what it means to me to have that body in the Senate. And I also, last thing I'll say, as I pass to Hakeem, there are questions called at that table that I don't hear around other places because the lived experience is different. It's why McKinsey talks about why diverse teams are better. Harvard Business School, it is making the Congress better, which is always what they've said about the Black Caucus being the conscience of the Congress. And it just has, I wish I could better express to America what it means to have that kind of representational body of Black folk up in there.
Yeah, I think, as Corey indicated, it was such an honor upon arriving in the Congress to be able to become a part of the Congressional Black Caucus, which meets every Wednesday when we're able to meet in person, now virtual, but as Corey indicated, every Wednesday, 12 o'clock, and it's the best hour of the week. Now, Corey's correct. He almost made a fatal mistake because it's the best hour of the week because of the company and the food. And that's the one week in Washington, you get some soul food, some chicken, some short ribs of beef, some macaroni and cheese, all the stuff that we know Corey's unhealthy. And we rotate each week, a different member provides the meal. And Corey showed up with some vegan food that nobody could figure out. We almost got run out of there. But I will say, Corey makes an important point that was also well received. And I've used this line, Corey, because we all borrow from each other. But he said, Black folks die more from drive-throughs than drive-bys. Die more from unhealthy eating and the complications and the diseases that flow from that than drive-by shootings. And so we all bring interesting perspectives anchored in our own life experiences and then pour into each other. And so the more of us, the better, both for improving our representation and also for improving the representation and the sensitivities and the sensibilities of those of our colleagues who are not people of color around us. And so, representation clearly matters. It makes a difference. And we're better public servants because of the service that we are able to engage in, bolstered by what we learn from each other. Now, that is a great line that Corey shared. It got himself out of the situation, which was precarious for him. And Speaker Pelosi often says, I just say this to all of you, that we have a rule of thumb here. The first time you say something, you can say, as Cory Booker said. The second time, as my good friend from the Senate said, the third time, it's all yours. So feel free to take that line as well.
Thank you both. I know we can continue this conversation all night. I want to have us end on this note. Can you each give us a call to action, a charge in terms of what is necessary to continue to build the pipeline of Black political leadership in this country?
Well, I'll just quickly say, and then yield to Corey to close us out. You know, run for something, do it for the right reasons, because you really want to make a difference. And then when you get the opportunity to get there, lean into making a difference. Corey indicated, you know, we had worked together on the First Step Act. We go back home and, you know, there are people whose lives were changed because of prison reform or sentencing reform. And the notion that there were people who looked like them within the halls of Congress, thinking about them as they were behind bars incarcerated, trying to bring about a more just society. It's an enormous opportunity that we all have at every level of government, and the needs are great. And it all starts, of course, in the electoral space by having to run for something. But as you run for something, understand that you may not be successful the first time, or you may not be successful as you take a step forward towards your ultimate destination. But perseverance is so important if you believe in the goal of being able to maximize your service. And if you continue to persevere, you'll get there. Churchill once said that success is not final, failure is not fatal. All that matters is the courage to continue. You know, I say it a different way. As I mentioned, a knockdown is different than a knockout. That's the Brooklyn remix of Winston Churchill. But onward, learn from any challenges that you encounter. It'll make you stronger. Keep moving forward, and you'll reach your destination. And when you do, deliver for our communities.
2 points: ego and grace. So the first is just something I think Hakeem does really well. This ain't about you at the end of the day. It really is not. It's about the mission. And you know, what a privilege. I mean, I'm not called to die for this cause. I never had to sit at a lunch counter knowing that I would get beaten. I mean, we sat at the table, Hakeem and I, with John Lewis, and I just don't know if I would have gone on a bus knowing it was going to get bombed, or would have gone out to register people to vote like Hakeem and I both have done, knowing that it could end up in a river in Mississippi and having your life threatened. So what we're called to do is, you know, we're never called to that level of courage. So damn it, show some courage in what you're doing. You know, I just remember somebody who told me off on fundraising. I hated doing call time, whatever. And somebody says, this ain't about you. You know, you're getting your own way. It's about your ego. I'm uncomfortable, whatever. This ain't about you. This is about, can you get more funding for sickle cell? Because it gets so much less funding than diseases that affect less people. This isn't about you. This is about, will women still be strapped down, or children when they're in prison when they're giving birth, or kids being put into solitary confinement. So get out of your own way and just do it. You know, this country is in urgent need of more diverse people in office. So shut up and do what you have to do, and do things that other people won't do, so you have victories other people don't get. And then the second thing is the act of grace. I love, one of my favorite things Hakeem said tonight was a feeling that, just like he and I can compare notes, but this has happened to me. You know, you're about to run for election, and Hakeem, you know this, you've got 10 people making promises to you of things they're going to do. And then they just, you know, people that you love, people you know, they're going to say, oh, I'm going to do this, I'm going to raise, and then it's crickets, especially if the heat gets on. If you're going up against the machine in Brooklyn or the machine in Newark, they just disappear. I had people, you know, not only tell me they couldn't help me anymore, but they couldn't even be seen with me in public. And so what I decided during going through that pain of disappointment, that I was going to be always in the other camp, of somebody that was always looking out for other people, And if I ever said I was going to do something, I try to do what, again, Hakeem's really good at this: under promise, over deliver. So for yourself, get your own ego out of the way, run, go, but always help other candidates out. Find them. I do things for the Democratic Legislative Committee. I do things for House members coming up. I do things for anything I can do. If I could, I want to be one of those folks that helps other people up. And God forbid, if you get elected, Kamala and I used to talk about this all the time. You think it's just your job is just to represent and be there and all. No, your job, especially if you're one of the few diverse people there, is to make sure you're not the last diverse person there. And you do everything you can to widen the door, pave the road, put some street lights out so other people can make a way as well.
Thank you both. I mean, this was a phenomenal conversation and very good food for the soul, whether it is vegan food or chicken and ribs. Either way, this was a wonderful conversation, and we are lucky to have you both in the roles that you're in. And I know the country is better for having you in the roles that you're in. Thank you for your service to the country and for giving us some time tonight.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. You're well. All right, we've gone a little over time, but I want to try to get Representative Bolding and School Board Member Davis back in for a closing question. So I'd ask you just if each of you could both share how Spark has been helpful to you and some advice you would have for other folks on this call who are contemplating running for office.
All right. Well, so I actually ran a couple years ago and pre-Spark, but I will say that Spark is fitting the need for something that was surely one of the biggest challenges when I was running, and that's raising money. And it was mentioned earlier today, fundraising, particularly for smaller races, which sounds opposite of what it should be, because you don't necessarily need a whole lot of money to run for school board. But it's not top of mind for folks. And so fundraising is an issue. And of course, when you are an only or one of a few, there's electability questions. And I think that Spark and Lee in particular, which is why I'm even here, the nudge that included an email, a phone call, and someone at my dining room table to run, we all need that support. And those are two issues that Spark is trying to help people overcome. And it can make the difference between there being that representation that we're talking about or there not. Because we don't come with the war chest of resources and all of the experience to actually make it happen. So yeah, Spark's doing great work, and my role now in Spark is just helping others to understand why they're needed to run. We've got to build the bench, and they've got support waiting for them.
And I think for me, it really boiled down to three things. I would say the network, the ideas, and then also the resources. And with regards to the network, I mean, we just saw it tonight, to have amazing national leaders who truly care about educational equity, criminal justice reform, health of our community. To be part of this network really is an inspiration, and it inspired me. And I think another component with regards to the ideas that we have leaders across this country, no matter if they're well known like Senator Cory Booker or not, that we have ideas on how we can change our community, and we're able to get that information from each other as former educators, as people who want to do more for our communities from unique backgrounds. That's extremely important. And I would say the resources, I've been able to really take bold action on policy legislation because we don't have to go to those institutional players who oftentimes are the contributors to elected officials and expect you to actually have the agenda that they want, but you can have the agenda that you want. That's the agenda for the people, the community, the kids that we're fighting for. And it's for those three reasons that I really say Spark has been incredible, and I think will continue to inspire more people.
Fantastic. Well, I thank you both for the great questions that you had and for sharing those insights and experiences and for your leadership and for your willingness to put your name on the ballot, to run, and then to try to help others to do the same. So thank you both.
There were laughs, there were amazing nuggets. I love that Senator Booker and Congressman Jeffries just went there and touched how provocative it was that, you know, this conversation was about Black political leadership, and it was three guys, three guys talking, and then Reginald Boulding came in, and there was one woman, Sharice Davis. So I'm just glad that we have leaders who aren't afraid to name the thing in the room and who aren't afraid to actively do the work to address representation in all of the ways that it challenges leadership in our communities today. I heard something really good. I hope you all heard it too. Senator Booker said, "Hope is the active conviction that despair will never have the last word." So we can hope for better, and that is something that we can actively do. And tonight, I'm just going to ask you all to actively click on the link that's been shared in the chat and let me know a little bit more about you, what you think about Black political leadership, what you'd like to see, and how we can engage you in our Spark community to support building more Black political leaders to bring the fire, to bring the justice, to bring the jokes, and to bring the non-vegan meals to convenings. Thank you all for an amazing night. Thank you, Secretary King. Thank you, Congressman Hakeem Jeffries. Thank you, Senator Cory Booker, Representative Boulding, and School Board Member Davis. This was an amazing conversation, and thank you all for joining us. Good night.